Hey everyone, welcome to Heart and Home. My name is John. This is
Michelle.
All right. Thank you for joining us tonight. Listen, we had a busy week. Busy week.
Super busy week. Yeah.
And we actually had this moment.
A big celebration this
Big
week.
celebration. Our son, our middle boy. We have 4.
Yeah.
3 of them are boys. Our middle boy turned 17. And it is crazy to think that he turned 17. And from that birth this video idea. Because we're sitting there, we're talking about how...
Well, I'll share a little bit. I whenever is a birthday for one of my kids, so we have 4 kids altogether. Our daughters are oldest, and then we have 3 boys that follow. And every time it's their birthday, I'm reminiscing on the day that I gave birth, right? Because it's their birthday, but it's also the anniversary of, the whole labor experience, right? And so our son turned 17 on the 17th of this month.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there thinking, speaking to John, and I'm just like, wow, 17 years ago, at this time, we were heading to the doctor. We were doing, it's such a vivid memory. I don't know if every mom is like that, but I know I am. Like, I am always like rethinking, like, wow, I can't believe how much time has passed by. But with David, there is even more story behind it, because David was our second boy and our 3rd child. So when we ended up coming out pregnant with Dave, I was so ecstatic. It's so interesting because I had like baby fever before I came out pregnant, and then I remember my mom telling me, like, you already have the girl and the boy, they're like almost like you could wait between having more children. But for some reason I went through like having baby fever, came out pregnant with Dave, was very excited, but also we've always kind of been transitioning into some sort of something, and we had just moved out of the Bronx into Queens, and so I had a new doctor, everything was new to us, even though this was baby number 3. Our daughter was in preschool. We had a younger son. And so one of the things that we had found out having a girl and then a boy was that our daughter was always very fast to learn
learned things quickly.
Yes. So she was like, she spoke quickly. She read quickly. She got along with friends. Like, everything seemed to kind of flow. When we had our son, he was just kind of very chill.
Yeah, he took forever to do anything.
Everything was like at his
potty
pace.
training took forever, everything.
It did. And so I remember that somebody told me, hey, boys have their own pace. So, but then...
And that kind of stuck. Like, all right, like, yes, boys do it differently.
Exactly. And so we got to the point where our son, then they said, boys have their own pace, but eventually they level off. Once they catch up, they kind of like go off running. And so that kind of was the thing with our second son. So he basically was just slow to speak, but then when he spoke, was speaking in full sentences, was doing all the things that his sister was doing. So when we had Dave was, he was just like a ray of sunshine, was always smiling. He was definitely mommy's little angel. He was always with me, was very like attached to me. We breastfed, which kind of like made him more clingy. He never took a pacifier, so we did a lot of comfort nursing. So I just thought that was the norm. That was just how he is. And because I had been told, hey, boys operate at their own pace, he was very like, I just kind of like didn't pay much attention to wanting him to meet certain milestones at a certain time, just because I had seen that my other son had basically like when it was his time, he picked up the pace and he learned everything that he was supposed to learn. So I thought that David would do the exact same thing. But what ended up happening with Dave is that quick to pick up, like he was learning. If anybody remembers this, it was like My Baby Can Read or Your Baby Can Read something, and we had bought all of that. And he learned all those words. He could decode. We would do, I think it was called like Dream English in YouTube, something like that. He was able to decode like words, and he was not even 2 years old. They were extremely bright, extremely smart. And then around 18 months old, he started to like not give eye contact and not really listen. And we would call his name and he wouldn't respond. And so I thought that was weird, right? But at the same time, I was pregnant with my son, with my youngest son. And I remember that I would hear family members say, oh, it's just that he can feel the baby, you know. And we had also stopped, I had weaned him off of the nursing, so it could be like, oh, he's just reacting to like the lack of closeness or not breastfeeding anymore. And the reality is that because that stuck with me, like boys have their own pace, their own thing. I'm just thinking this is a phase. I'm not really reading much into it. So we started to notice a shift. We started to notice shifts in him when he was, and then, you know, also that's around the time frame when you don't really go to the doctors. You know, I think like when they're first born, you go like every 6 weeks, then it's like every other month, then it's like every 6 months, and by the time you reach 18 months, you don't go again to the doctor until they're 2. So by the time he was 2, I go to the doctor and I say, hey, I'm noticing these things, like he's really picky to eat, or he likes, like, for instance, he would like raw rice versus regular cooked rice, or raw pasta versus, you know, like anything that was like crunchy he liked. He didn't like anything mushy, you know, and because he had been exclusively breastfed for a while, and also he had like, his teeth took a while to come in. So we would kind of mash everything up for him or cut everything up in pieces for him. So we would notice he was very selective with food and stuff like that. She said, oh, you know, this is bringing up some like red flags, but not enough that I think that we should dig into that. And I'm like, okay, but at 2 years old, they don't go back to the doctor until they're 3. So now when he's 3, she brings up, are you still concerned with these things? By the time he was 3, those concerns were, you know, they were kind of gone. That was not something that was even a concern anymore. And so, but I would have other things, you know, that would come up. The difference is that now we had our youngest.
Now we're able to compare.
So our youngest, he came into this world ready for this world. Like he just was, I think he even learned things quicker than our daughter ever did. And so the thought that we were given, which was like, oh, boys do everything at their own pace and kind of like take their time and then whatever. James was just like, he broke the mold for all of our kids. You know, he was just smart. He talked, he listened. He, even for potty training, he just like took off the diaper and started using the bathroom. Like there was just so many things that he did. But what happened is that by the time that Davy turned 4 and that James was 2, James was way more advanced than David. And then because our oldest son always did things at his pace, and he just was super mild-tempered, almost like aloof and kind of like nonchalant. He just kind of like went with the flow. So we didn't really notice a lot of like, how do we compare these 3 boys totally different? You know, and what we started noticing though was that around 3 years, when Davy was between 3, almost 4 years old, he started having more behaviors. So it was like a lot of crying. We couldn't really soothe him. And then I kind of felt like, well, what could it be? Like, I'm no longer pregnant. So we did a lot of like, okay, you hold James, I'll hold David. And I was everything like for David. Like I was soothing him, I was calming him down. But there were moments where how he felt, there was no explaining why he was overreacting, why he was screaming a certain way. Like we would wake up to like just like these piercing screams. Like if you've ever from back in the day ever watched like a Freddy Krueger movie or like any one of those movies where it's like somebody's running from somebody with like a chainsaw, like we would wake up to like that kind of screaming. And I said, okay, something has to be off, or we like our youngest is doing fine, the older two are doing fine, like what's going on here, you know? And so in the midst of that, we sold our home, we moved to Long Island, and then when we moved to Long Island, you know, you change your doctor, you know, you do all that stuff. I went to the doctor with my younger two, and he checked, you know, did the physicals on both of them, and I spoke to the doctor. I said, listen, I have some real valid concerns. You know, my 2-year-old is way more advanced than my 4-year-old. Like he speaks in full sentences, while my 4-year-old, I have a hard time just getting his attention. Like sometimes he pays attention, sometimes he doesn't. You know, the screaming, the agitation with certain things, he's still very picky to eat. And the doctor said, well, maybe he just has a speech delay. But at this point, he had turned 4. So when he turned 4, he said, unfortunately, he just missed the mark to do the early intervention. And so now you got to go through the school district. And so, so I remember coming home and giving John the information. And I just wanted you to share a little bit of like what you thought about when now the doctor is saying, okay, this might actually be a concern, something deeper.
Yeah, and I think because I am in education, your brain starts to think like, okay, what, you know, your meter starts going off. Like, what are the options? And you know, obviously the big one for us was autism. Like, okay, could this be it? You know, you start reading stuff and you start getting all this information, and then before you know it, you know, you get to this point where they solidified, like, yeah, this is it. This is autism. And that led to what we would consider like real grief, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we call it grief because the reality is that life would be different. And what you ultimately start, and it's really speaking to a lot of families who, and that's really the root of how we even got to this video, was we're thinking about this like, wow, you know, we're years into this now, and it's still not perfect. No. Every day is different, you know, but we started thinking about families who may be watching this, where like, wow, like I'm just getting a diagnosis, or I'm about to get a diagnosis, or I think
I'm afraid like wrong,
you know,
and what would life look like?
Yeah, so you have a lot of thoughts, and your brain is going 1,000 miles per hour and thinking the worst. But I think what you ultimately are starting to grieve is you're starting to grieve the life that you pictured. Yeah. You know, because, you know, when you have little ones, and all of ours were small around the same time.
They were tiny. They were so cute.
Yeah, they were. But you start thinking about you start dreaming their future, you know. Oh, they'll do Little League, and then after Little League, they'll do track, and then they go to school, and then they do this. So you've sort of mapped out this picture of what the typical child will do. Then they're gonna have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and then they go to the college, and then they get married, and you know, so you start mapping this out, and we didn't really have these words at that time, but later on, and you realize like, wow, what we're really grieving is the life that we thought he would have. And this picture that you've created in your head. And there's a lot of unknowns. So unless you've had a child with autism or any special need, really, there's just a lot of unknowns. You know, you don't know. Like right now, we are about to enter into his adulthood very soon. That's a new unknown for us.
This is a transition year for him.
So every time he went to a new school was a different. So that time, that's what we were grieving. Is really grieving the life that things are going to be different. You know, and then we start getting into, you know, how do we're from a Caribbean background. If anybody has a Caribbean background, our Caribbean, I love them. I love them to death, but they don't understand special needs. They just think you gotta spank it out of the child, or you got And then in contrast, we were in church. We were pretty new believers, so you got the Caribbean family who's like, you just gotta put a firm hand on them, and they'll whip them into shape. They don't believe in diagnosis. Then you got the church life that's like, man, you gotta be praying harder. We gotta just cast this demon out, and and you're not believing enough, or what's the sin, or like,
or what did you do
what
wrong?
did you do wrong? Like, so you have these two dynamics that are happening. So now you don't want to be fully transparent with the church, you don't want to be fully transparent with the family, but you gotta be, because you're gonna notice that something is different. So there's a very real grief that has happened, and a very real pain that's happened when you first get a diagnosis of anything. But in our case specifically, it was autism. And so we've been thinking about that. And we've been thinking about those early days, and what that felt like, and for us, it's like, man, we got to be able to share with people, to really just encourage them, because it is difficult when you get a diagnosis, and there's just a lot of pain, and not everybody understands it.
No.
Not everybody gets it. And again, we're living in two worlds. Got the family who say you should be doing this. You got the church people who are saying you should be doing this, and you feel like you're doing something wrong.
But then also actually living it out. So what did it look like for us? Dave was diagnosed when he was 4. So we're 13 years into this journey. And I remember he had to have a psychological, social, psychological, what's it called? Psychosocial evaluation. Then where it looks kind of like the doctor's playing with him, like doing puzzles or whatever. Then he has to have a speech evaluation. Then he had to see an audiologist. And then I think those were the 3. Yeah, I think those were the 3. And then he sat down with me at the time, and he said, well, what do you think it is? And I said, I did every Google search you could do at that time. And we're talking, Dave was 4, so this is 2013? Yeah, 2013, 2012. 2013, it was 2013. And literally, I said, the only thing I could think of is autism. But when you look at autism, like it was such it was so broad.
That's why they call it a spectrum.
That's why they call it a spectrum. I'm like, really, all of us could be autistic. Like, all of us have characteristics that would qualify for that. And what the doctor had explained, the psychologist had explained to me, said that it is a spectrum. So it's when you have like red flags in the different categories. And
he has enough markers.
Yeah, David had like pretty significant markers. But he's always been verbal. He's always spoken. He knows how to read.
But
he's very
verbal
smart,
but I think the only disclaimer I would give when it's in terms of him being verbal and him being able to read, we love that he was able to read. But then you later realize, like, wait, he's able to decode it. Yeah. But in terms of comprehension and actually carrying on, like, totally different story. Yeah.
So, like, for instance, I'll give an example. When they were doing the speech evaluation, the doctor could ask him, point to your head, point to your ears, point to your mouth. He could do all of those things. But when she said, what do you use to hear? He couldn't answer that. So he knew where his ear was. But at that point, when he was 4, he couldn't say, I hear with my ears. And but if he had watched like a video that had mentioned hearing with your ears, or a song that had mentioned hearing with your ears,
did a lot of scripting.
He knew how to script. He knew how to use like certain things in context where you would think, okay, he's understanding, but not fully. I mean, now that he's 17, absolutely, there's certain things that he can comprehend, but really it's things that interest him. He still
scripts a lot.
Yeah, he still scripts a lot, and he has a photographic memory, so he could watch something, read something, and like
that's a double-edged sword.
Oh yeah,
it's a great thing.
Yes,
but then when the child
sees something
that is not good,
that is not
it's
good,
in his brain,
it's
and
locked,
and
and
it's
it's on
like
a loop.
it's on a loop, yeah. And so so when the speech therapist told us was his language, though he knows a lot of vocabulary, his language is at the most basic level. Like we would have to reteach him what language really is. And I remember that when the doctor finally confirmed like it is autism, I felt two things. One, I felt relief. That was my first initial thing. Like, okay, there's something wrong. I felt for a while something was off. So the relief came from,
now we know what.
Like, the relief came from like, you're not crazy standpoint. There is something off. But then the magnitude of the word felt like a ton of breaks, because I'm like,
like what now?
Like what now? And
like how do you fix this?
How do you navigate that?
What
like,
happens?
Like what is this? I didn't know anybody that had autism, like personally. And I think that for us, especially that year, we had just moved, so there was so many moving parts at that time that I was just like, man, could we even handle something like this right now? You know? And I remember that psychologist, he told me, he's like, hey, Mrs. Frias, I want you to do this thing for me. I do not want you to bury any of whatever future plans you have for your child. I don't want you to bury any of that. Like, he's still your little boy. He's still your son that you love so much. Don't let that change you. He's like, but what I am going to need you to do is to learn how to step up to be his voice when he doesn't have one.
Yeah. And that's really an encouragement for anybody who's watching.
It really was. So I, in a moment where I'm such a person that needs direction, I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but if I have clear directions, I could kind of like just be on mission. So I think that in him saying that, I was just like, I'm going to drive with this. I'm going to go with this. Like, I'm going to learn about autism. I'm going to learn how to be an advocate. I'm going to learn what my child needs, whatever. He taught me, the biggest thing that he also shared with me is under the idea is like individuals with disabilities equality act. I forget the name of it. I forget the law, but what he did mention was under that law, in New York State, I'm not sure about the other states, your child is allowed a free and appropriate education, which means like your child gets to be placed in the right placement. Don't take anything, like, don't just let them put him in a corner and give him a crayon. You know, like you are allowed to have a free education, and that it is in an appropriate setting. And so he gave me just these pointers. He's like, when you go, he's like, they're gonna allow you to go and see preschools. When you go, make sure that it's the right place. That it's the right place for him, that you feel comfortable, that you're at ease with it, you know, whatever. And I think we just went into it like, well, what does this mean? But in the midst of knowing what to, like, having a task to do, there was a lot of feelings that I was feeling. It was almost like, did I do anything different? Did I do anything? Did I do anything wrong while I was pregnant? You know, this is the baby that I desired. Like, I actually had, like, all our babies, I want to say, were nice gifts from God. Like, we didn't plan them. We didn't do ovulation tracking. We didn't do any of that. But I know that with Dave, before I came out pregnant with Dave, I had like actual baby fever. And so I like really desired to have a baby. And so when we came out pregnant, although financially we were strained, although we had just moved from the Bronx to Queens and really wasn't like the best timing, I was just elated. And so I just had thought about so many things. Did I sleep wrong? Was this wrong of me to have
you start to think a whole bunch of things.
I thought so many things. But also what I realized was, this is territory that we just didn't know. Like, we just didn't. And one of the things that when we had gone, actually, we as a lot of people, when John had gone to the school district, because you had to like fill out a crazy application to get into the, like, he had to apply to go into the school district in order to get the evaluation. The lady that was there, and so I want to say that one of one other thing that we have seen is that God has had his hand in a lot of this, because John, which was a little bit more apprehensive about like the stigma that comes with a diagnosis, especially in the school, like in the school system, you know, and we didn't even think about like how family was going to take it. I think we just went into go mode. The lady had said, you know, if your child had any other kind of ailment, like
you would do
something about it. Like if your child needed glasses, you go do glasses. If you had a child that needed a wheelchair, you wouldn't hesitate. You would go and get it. So this is something, the diagnosis is something that will be beneficial for your child. So that whatever challenges they have, you know, they take that into account when teaching your child. And I think that that was also like a God moment.
We saw a lot of those.
Yeah, because it also like it shifted our perspective. So though our expectations were kind of like what happens now, and we didn't have to bury some of our expectations of what we thought it would be like he would be 4. Oh, we're thinking, kindergarten is next year, and that's exciting, but it was really hard to manage. By the time Davey was 4, it was really hard to manage him. You know, he did a lot of eloping. Like, if you don't know what that means, it's like he knew how to unlock every door, and he would just like take off running. And we'd do a lot of chasing, and it was really scary. And he didn't really have fear to throw himself off steps and couches and tables.
But God was, honestly, God was very faithful. And really, just as a word of encouragement, you know, for anybody who's watching, like when Michelle was talking about the person we met at the school district, or even the doctor, like that's what we saw. We saw God send people at precise time with the right information that we need, connecting us to some resource. So we saw his hand. It wasn't like all at once.
No.
And we were stressed all the time. However, we saw God really put a village around us. You know, if you are part of this special ed community, you know what I'm talking about. You know, he sent this village around us, and he sent people. So even up to this day, like we've seen God just like give us favor with this person, favor with that person. So, you know, so really, I think I guess that just as a final encouragement really is to say that our faith has just grown because of Dave, because we've been forced to, you know, I think about Paul. Paul's a good example in the Bible where it's like, you know, he prayed and God was like, I'm not removing that one thing because he said, my grace is sufficient. We have really felt the fact that his grace is sufficient.
Absolutely.
So, you know, we have prayed about this diagnosis countless times. I mean, you know, to this day, I still pray about this diagnosis. However, God has allowed us to stay in the season with him, but he's put the people around us. Our faith has grown because of the favor. We've grown as individuals. We've had greater compassion with people, greater patience with people, because we've just
even with each other.
Or even with each other, because we live in this world. This is our 24/7. So I would say it's just as an encouragement, you know, seeing him now versus then. He's come a long way. He still got more to go, you know, but because we've seen God's faithfulness throughout this whole thing, that's my encouragement to anybody who's watching. If you've just gotten a diagnosis, or you're pending a diagnosis, stay encouraged. And even if you get a diagnosis, it's not the end of the world. Trust that God will supply the right people you need, the right information you need when you need it. You know, the right service when you need that service. And it's easier for us to say it now because we can look back. It wasn't easy to see it then.
No.
But that's I guess for me a final encouragement to anybody that's watching. Just hold on, because God is 100% faithful, and he knows what he's doing. He knows how long seasons are. He knows what he's doing each season. It's hard to see it. So I think, you know, as we thought about our child who just turned 17, we're like, man, like we should really just give a word of encouragement for people who are entering this or starting this or brand new to this, because it's not the end of the world. it is difficult. Every day will challenge you. The future is still like I said, he's about to enter into adulthood. That's another thing we gotta now figure out. So we don't have all the answers, but we gotta figure it out. But he's been faithful up to this point.
Yes.
So we can trust him after this point. So I don't know if you have any final word of encouragement for
emphasis on the final.
Yes.
So several things. I think yes, you mentioned that our faith has grown. I think the biggest thing that came from that is while we have 4 kids, I think we have trusted God the most with David. And we have seen how faithful God is when we fully surrender, mainly because we don't know what to do, and so one day what worked yesterday doesn't work today. I've seen God stretch us. I've seen God give us grace. I've seen God give us patience. Like if I can have patience for a screaming, tantruming child, then I could have patience for the rude, what's it called, cashier at the bank or at the DMV. Like I realize that there is a greater capacity as to what God can help us do when we don't have any choice. Because if I don't have to deal with you, I'm gonna keep it. I could just keep it moving. But the fact that God is like, you're going to grow in this area. Like I've seen God be a good father to David, and I've seen God be a good father to us. So I want to say, remain prayerful. Like feel all your feelings. Like I think that the Bible does a beautiful thing. I've seen 2 things. Number one, in the book of Psalms, you see how King David, when he wrote the Psalms, he would be so open to the Lord and say, like, God, you have
are you still hearing me?
Yeah, like many are those that are rise up against me. Many are those that are seeking me. But then like it's almost like, where are you, God, in the midst of this? But then he would have these moments where it's like, wait, but thou, O Lord, you are a shield for me. Like he would remember who God was. And that's really called lamenting, when you let out what what your feelings are to God, who has the ability and the capacity to hold the weight of your grief, to hold the weight of like your disappointment, your discontent, all these things. Like God can hold them. It is not too heavy for God to hold. But that then you remember who he is. Wait a second. God knew David before he was ever in my womb. Like God created David. This is not a curse. This is something that God created. He's able to fully heal David if that is his will. But if this is something that David has to live with the rest of his life, he knew the parents that he was going to give. He knew what we needed. He knew what we had to surrender. Like he's using it in every single season. So like I could look at it and say, I would want my son to be perfect. But guys, if you're listening out there, there's so many things that we bring on upon ourselves this is something that we didn't bring upon ourselves. This is something that David didn't bring upon himself. And he has to walk through it. And it's helping him to have faith in the one who created him. Is helping us to have faith in the God who created us, and being able to see God as provider. So the Lord has provided people within the school system that have helped us. He has provided us great doctors for David. He has provided us great insight. But on top of being prayerful, dig in and know your stuff. Go in and find out, what are the laws. Find out, what does autism look like? How does it present? What is going on in the brain? Like, be knowledgeable also. Don't just be like, oh, my child has autism. We don't let autism be a crutch for David, because he is a 17-year-old young man that has autism. Autism doesn't have him. Meaning, like, we still hold him accountable for his behaviors, his reactions. We still ask him to be polite. We still ask him to try again. We don't let that be a crutch to him. He still has to do homework. He still has to show up and be a regular person. The same. We don't put on him what he is incapable of doing. But what he is capable of doing, we always challenge him.
Yeah.
We always challenge him to do. This is a child that at 4 years old learned how to take the bus by himself, the school bus by himself, went to a school out of district, was able to come to an in-district school. He has done...
He could do a lot more. He could do a lot.
So much. So the encouragement is, as they get older, there is more that they can do. At least that's the experience that we have had.
For sure.
You know, maturity comes. It comes slowly, but it does happen. We celebrate all the wins. We tell him, hey, today was a rough day. Let's try again tomorrow. And we encourage ourselves with the same. Like, we're living one day at a time.
For sure.
Because we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. One of the biggest blessings was when he no longer screamed bloody murder to wake up in the morning. That was a blessing for us, and that was a very long time ago, you know. And there's moments where we recognize like, okay, he's overstimulated. We've also recognized, like, you know, like, we've paid attention and have learned a lot, because there's sometimes that he doesn't have the language to express to us how he feels. And so we are compassionate with that. But there's moments where we lose our patience and we're like, this was a lot. Like, we're exhausted. So feel your feelings, bring them to God, know your stuff. But also, it is the biggest blessing is to see David grow up to be the young man that God created him to be. So it may not have been what we thought, what we dreamed of, but it is a beautiful and full life.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
Definitely.
and so we've been able to see the beauty.
I see the hand of
and
God.
see the hand of God. And so for us, if you are a family member of someone that has had a diagnosis and they're struggling with it, if you are noticing certain things that seem off about your child, and you're afraid of what having a name put to it, what that would be. If you are the one that has just had a diagnosis and you're feeling the weight of it, feel your feelings, but know that knowing what it is and being knowledgeable,
knowing that you could take those feelings to God.
and being knowledgeable about what it is only going to help you and your child in the long run, because now you know kind of like what you're up against. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, you know, if you are one of these people that are like, I'm going to pray and fast to cast it out, then you now know it by name. You know what I mean? If you are like, I want to know what happens in the brain and how I can be a better advocate for my child, now you know the name. But the biggest name to know above it all is that Jesus is the one that created your child.
For sure.
And he is the one that will guide you, the one that will help you. Like, there is hope. There is so much joy at the end of what you may be feeling right now, which may be like shame or guilt. And I will say this, if you are a family member of somebody that has a child with special needs, please ask questions. Please ask questions. You know, I don't know why I felt like sharing this, but ask questions. I have a dear friend that has asked me so many questions about my son. And it is such a breath of fresh air, because she genuinely wants to know, like, how do you do this, and like how do you move about this, and how could you do this and still have a smile on your face. And she has asked so many questions, but from such a genuine place, and it makes all the difference in the world to the person going through that, to say, hey, I don't want to know to judge you. I don't want to know to give an opinion. I just want to understand. You know, I just want to see how I can help you. I just want to be a blessing to you. So I will encourage you that whatever your stance is, God is at the end of it. Let God use you to be a person that will say, hey, when you can't go to the grocery store, I'll go and grab you. If you're having a rough day and they're tantruming, I'll grab the milk for you, just so that you don't have to drive in the car like that. You know, it makes such a big difference. But you will see God's hand if you put it in his hands and you trust him. So we have been in it 13 years deep. Every day is a different day. Every season is a different season. But God has been really, really good. God has been really, really good to him and to us.
Listen, we would love to hear if you got a story, if you, whatever place you're at, we would love to hear it. Drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear kind of your take on all this and hear where you're at. So We truly thank you for staying to the end of this video. And our goal is to be able to share a little bit more as we go on, as it relates to parenting a child with special needs. And if you have some questions, listen, drop it in the comments, and we'll be here to answer them as best as possible.
Yes.
All right, guys, listen, thank you for staying with us, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.